What do I get? I get a lot out of this. This is when Mrs. Mason and I started kind of discussing this, as she started giving me a little bit of a history of Brunswick and the high school. It just seemed like something that if I didn't do it, the whole phrase "inspiration in motion" didn't really hold its weight. Like, this is exactly what I want my program to represent, being able to accomplish something like this. So the fact that we were able to do this, the fact that we were able to raise the money and come down here and actually meet you guys, and the fact that there was a lot of trust put into this as well, just in the terms of Mrs. Mason having to trust me that some guy from 1,400 miles away was claiming to send skateboards to her and money and art supplies and all of these things. That took an incredible amount of trust for her to kind of put her neck on the line and believe that I was going to be down here and actually doing this, and vice versa. So it was just one of those things that I think this opportunity fully encompasses everything that I preach about, so to speak. I don't really like the word preach, but when I'm talking to classes and the messages I want to get across, this is it in a nutshell. It couldn't be more perfect of an example of what my message is.
Okay.
So.
That's really, really nice of you. Just really, really nice of you.
No problem.
Let's see. What do you like about doing the skateboards? What is your favorite part of doing skateboard design?
Skateboard design in general. My favorite part about finishing a skateboard is my favorite part. When I've actually finished one and I see the final result, I get really jazzed up about that, because I honestly start a skateboard with a certain amount of disbelief in myself, which is a lot of, being able to kind of teach that as well helps me to get through that myself. Because I sit down and I think about, I'm going to try and accomplish this skateboard here, and I don't always believe that I got it in me. So then to accomplish that and to see it actually happen and to see the finished result, that is my number one favorite thing about drawing skateboards. And it happened the very first skateboard I ever drew, the skateboard beginnings, the Minneapolis Skyline. When that was finished, I remember bringing it over to my friend's house, and we were all kind of looking at it, and as a group we were just talking about what it would be like and how cool it would be to kind of work in the art field as a career. And finishing that board, I kind of had this epiphany that this is what I'm going to do somehow, some way. And fast forward 8 or 9 years later, and here we are.
So do you do it for a living, or do you have another job? Or?
I do, yeah. I do it for a living. I mean, I make a living in a number of different ways. It's, the educational program is definitely something that's gaining a lot of steam and is starting to kind of, pay its way and develop itself. And I put a lot of work into just developing that from a simple idea, where it was just myself and a school that I went to just as a casual conversation, to actually doing full programs. And then owning a skateboard business as well, that all kind of wraps itself into each other. So, and then I sell a lot of actual art, we put on shows, and I have a gallery, so I'm actually selling artwork, selling skateboards, doing the programs. Being an artist is not a very glamorous thing, to be completely honest with you. There's not a lot of money in it. So yeah, it's tough. And and it's one of those things where you'll struggle for so many years, and then all of a sudden, pop, you're rich and famous. And it's not necessarily a rich and famous type of thing, but it's like all of a sudden, at one certain point in time, the whole world finally agreed that you were worthy of being, one of the top artists.
Would you say that usually that is when people die?
It is. A lot of times, it's getting better and better, and I think that's because of the internet. There's, it used to be that you didn't really get much recognition until after you were dead, but I think that had a lot to do with the fact that it was very difficult for people to learn of these new artists and to put on a show and things like that. When you put on a show nowadays, you're Facebooking it, there's Twitter, there's a million things out there. I mean, I'll put out a new piece of art every single day and have 500 people view that piece of art on a daily basis, just because I can put it in an online forum. Whereas, the classic artists and artists of 10, 15 years ago and earlier, they didn't really have that option. They would work 2-3 years for one show. And so nowadays, artists have the tools to really, really, really put themselves out there. And it's basically up to the artist in terms of how they want to be successful in the art world and what they want to do with it, because your options are really endless at this point. So,
would you say that like, how is the art world growing? Like, how is it changing? How has it changed from being like a big thing to what it is now? Because like back then, you know, art was like bam, it was like awesome, it was amazing. Like, how is it now? How do people see art? What do they think of?
I think it depends. I think you'd have to kind of take that question and sort of break it into different genres. Because there's certain genres that are extremely, extremely popular and still going like absolutely crazy. And then there's other genres that are newer genres where I would kind of fit in, which is going to be like the lowbrow urban art. I don't consider myself a street artist, but like that street art crowd. Whereas like just for instance, a couple months ago, the first ever street art auction was held in Los Angeles. And so the fact that an auction like Sotheby's or Christie's took all of the street art and actually did an auction with that, and those are some of the most classic auction houses in the world that usually do Picassos and Rembrandts and things of that nature, and they designated an entire show to street art, shows you that the movement of art is changing. And the show Art of the Streets at the LA MoCA this past summer was a huge, huge push of that as well. You have guys like Banksy and Shepard Fairey and Retna, and then all these classic graffiti writers from the New York 80s wild style era, all showing in a museum setting. And that was a groundbreaking show. And I went to the show, I wasn't in it, but I went and got to see it, and it was like a huge inspiration for me to see that, because it shows you that there's opportunities and there's careers in these fields. And these artists that used to really not get a whole lot of respect are starting to come around and become the hottest artists of tomorrow. So.
Okay. Do I have any more questions? Well, what are you like? Tell us about you.
What am I
like? Beyond the whole skateboard thing.
Well, this, the truth of me is that the skateboards are actually few and far between in terms of what I'm creating nowadays. I like to paint a lot more. I like to do, I work on different stuff now. I think a lot of that has to do with the fact that I got a studio now, because I have more room and I can actually get messy. Before I was drawing skateboards in my living room, I wasn't gonna break out a 4-foot canvas and fling paint all over the place.
I used to do that stuff outside.
So nowadays it's kind of, the skateboards are taking a bit of a backseat, but I also think that's just sort of my evolution as an artist is growing from the illustration aspect and into a different, it's not intentional, but I'm just sort of growing into different styles of art and trying a number of different things. And it's, me as a person, I just work a lot. I work too much. I work all the time, so it's pretty much all I do. But I love doing it. I love what I do. I mean, like you said earlier, you and I were chatting, this said if you are doing what you're passionate about, you'll never work a day in your life. And I feel like still don't really have a job and have the best time of my life. So.
Well, that is like really inspiring. It's like, I just feel like, you have to, like, people put in front of you, you have to have a job to be happy, and like you have to go to this cookie cutter, like, gray office building, and you're just stuck in a little cubicle just typing away. And I don't think it has to be like that. And you're proof that it doesn't have to be like that.
True.
And that's why you inspire me so much.
Well, I appreciate that. There is something to be said though, because that cookie cutter way of life is not necessarily, it's not bad. It's not for everybody, but the alternative to that is extremely hard. And that's the one thing I think that especially the younger youth of today have to understand, is that very, very, very few people can break into very successful roles without having some of that foundation. And that's why school and everything is so important, and that's why education is so important. And I really hope that that's what my message is bringing. It's like, you get to choose your path, absolutely. Whether you decide you want to go to college or whether you decide you want to do anything in life, you get to choose your path. And the amount of success that you're going to have is completely up to you. And to do things without certain degrees or things of that nature, it can be difficult. It just takes, it takes a creative way of thinking, and it's not easy. So work ethic is one of the most important things. And work ethic, I think, is something you do learn in school. You do learn that you have to, I certainly used many of the things that I learned in high school and things like that today, by all means. So it's important. It's very important. But yeah, you definitely, when you follow your passions, you're gonna find yourself in your own your own roles, you know, creating your own jobs. So. I don't know if those were the answers.
I didn't know if I could actually hold my hands up that long, but I did.